Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston Sports Podcast, part of the Bleav Network, and joining me to break down the Kyle Tucker trade, the Astros offseason so far, and the future of the Astros is who else but Astros future host and longtime friend of the show, Jimmy Brice. Happy holidays, Jimmy. Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, same to you. Appreciate you having me on again. I know it's been a little while, but happy to chop it up now.
Absolutely. And what a way to start. We got a Kyle Tucker trade. Did the Astros get enough there? What did you think of the trade?
You know, it's one of those ones where, like, if you as an Astros fan want to walk away thinking that you got a steal, then it's probably not going to be realistic. And I know a lot of people, you would see that on social media, where if both fans are upset at what they gave up or what they got, then it's probably a fair trade. But I mean, when you're talking about 1 year of a player, I mean, go look at what the Yankees traded for Juan Soto, and it's a little bit different of a package because it was a little bit older pitchers. But I think getting a guy like Isaac Paredes, who can, you know, be an everyday player for your team for 3 or 4 years, and then landing a top 100 prospect and a guy that I think is going to fly up the rankings. I know he was maybe 73 or something like that on the latest ranking that was towards the end of the season. But, you know, when you look at what he did in college and then what he did when he got drafted, I could see him flying up the ranking. But then you also got a pitcher that sounds like they want to use as a starter. And that's kind of intriguing too. And, you know, the Astros have done some wonders with some pitchers that have really nasty stuff, but maybe kind of, haven't really harnessed it. And Wesnewski seems like one of those guys that they might be able to get something more out of.
Is Cam Smith the highest draft choice that the Astros have had in their system since Kyle Tucker and Alex Bregman? Do you have to go back that far?
Yeah, I think because he was number 14, and I think, you know, Whitley was number 16, I believe, somewhere in that range. And I think JB Bukowskis from UNC a while back was in that range too, that mid-level, I believe. So, but yeah, no, he's probably the highest pick we've had in since that 2015 draft.
Is it accurate to say Dana Brown's going to be judged on this trade by what Cam Smith turns into?
Yeah, I think so. I think if Paredes does what he's been doing the last couple of years and he's a solid major league player, but Cam Smith, you know, completely falls on his face and doesn't do much, I think it's going to be looked at as a not a good trade. If Paredes is decent for a couple of years and moves on, and then Cam Smith comes up and is a starting third baseman or whatever position he ends up at for years to come and is a good player, then I think it's going to clearly be looked at as a win. But yeah, he's the main chip in this deal. You know, getting a guy back like Paredes, I think, is important. You know, you didn't completely sacrifice the major league team, but you still added a top prospect to a system that needed, you know, some more help.
Dana Brown has no fear when it comes to moving up prospects in the system. And I don't know about you, Jimmy, but I wouldn't be surprised if Cam is playing in Houston by June or July. Am I crazy?
Yeah, I mean, that would be very fast, but we've seen him move people extremely, extremely fast. Last year was crazy. I mean, they moved guys up really fast. We've seen guys start out at the major league level early on in the season. You know, Brice Matthews, despite some injuries last year, made it up to Double-A. Guys moving up to Triple-A. So I think Cam Smith will probably start out in Double-A. We'll see how fast they want to move him, see what position he's playing, see what happens at his potential major league position at the major league roster, you know, third base. But I wouldn't completely rule it out. And if he starts like he hit last year in the minors and he's hitting the ball like that, you know, he'll be in Triple-A in no time. And if the Astros need the help, I don't think Dana Brown's afraid to start that clock on anybody.
When you started looking at Cam Smith's numbers, what stuck out to you about his numbers in the minors and at Florida State? What makes him so special?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's got really good power, you know, good athlete, driving the ball all over the field. It's not just pull power. He's hitting home runs to right field, hits for some average. You know, you see a lot of these college guys come in, even at the early picks, and they come in and maybe they have some strikeout concerns or the power doesn't immediately translate. But that wasn't the case with him. He came in 32 games, hit 313, 5 doubles, 4 triples, 7 homers. I think he had maybe 24 strikeouts in 32 games. I don't remember the exact percentages, but everything that he was kind of doing in college translated. And that's good to see because you look at a guy like Walker Yannick, you know, the Astros first-round pick, and he was going from a smaller school in Sam Houston State, but you know, he really struggled in Asheville following the draft. And you've seen that from a lot of first-round picks. So to see Cam Smith come in and have success immediately and making up to Double-A like that is very encouraging for his future.
One of the things that I was looking at is some people were saying, well, he's not necessarily a future third baseman. Others were saying, oh, no, yeah, he's got really good potential as a third baseman. What have you heard? What have you seen when you've looked through different reports?
Yeah, I think it's early. I mean, you're a lot of that judging is maybe off of 32 games in the minors, and probably not all 32 were at third base. So we'll see where he ends up. I mean, we've seen the Astros kind of move guys around. Maybe he gets some time in the outfield. Maybe they give him some time at first base. I'll have to see more to kind of give really a detailed breakdown on how he is defensively and read a little bit more on him. But at this point, I think the Astros, clearly from last year, they need some hitters. And I don't care where it's almost like we were really good defensively with Jake Myers and Dubon and Chas McCormick out there. But eventually you got to have some hitting, and I think Cam Smith might be able to bring that to the team.
Hayden Wesnewski, he's a Cy-Fair graduate from Houston. The other two Cy-Fair grads who played for the Astros that I found were just Woody Williams and Robbie Grossman. Oh, and Cal McNair, also a Cy-Fair grad. If Luis Garcia is not ready to play, is Wesnewski the likely fifth starter at the beginning of the season?
Shaking it down right now, I think he's got a really good chance. It sounds like his stuff is really, really good, and it's just been a matter of kind of putting it together. I think he made 28 appearances last year. 7 of them were as a starter, but the strikeout numbers were there. The ERA was under 4. And like I said, I mean, we've seen the Astros make some really good changes to, Kikuchi maybe is an example, not to say that they're anything alike, but you look at what he did in Toronto, and then he comes over, the Astros make that little tweak on him, and next thing you know, he's throwing more. Was it the 2 seams he was throwing more of, I think, or something? But, He changes his repertoire just a little bit and started seeing a lot more success. So I think he's going to get every chance to start. And that to me changes the trade a little bit. If he comes in and he's a starter and starts 25, 30 games and is solid, I mean, even ERA in the 3.84 range for a full season, if you're getting that on top of Paredes and a top prospect, I think that does change the value a little bit the Astros got for just one season of Kyle Tucker.
One thing that made me feel a whole lot better about the trade is when I saw Keith Law trash it. I don't know about you, but I am not a Keith Law guy. And
it seems like anything Astros related, he trashes. And I mean, you go back to like the prospect rankings, and sure, you could look at some where like, oh, he was right, but there's been plenty where he was wrong. So no, I'm good with it. I think, anytime that you're in your, what you would call a championship window or the golden era, you don't want to move these guys, but the Astros, I think it was the right move. I haven't really gone like public and talked about it a lot just because I haven't been on a podcast to even do that, or I didn't feel like tweeting it out or typing it or whatever, but I think it's the right move. I think the philosophy behind the trade is right. You lost Garrett Cole, you lost George Springer, you lost Carlos Correa, potentially about to lose Alex Bregman, and you got nothing for those guys. You got a comp pick, and it ends up being a second or a third or a fourth round pick, and then you got to hope that you hit on that. Eventually, I think this isn't a rebuilding move. I think this is a way you can retool. You get an everyday player in Paredes, and you get a top prospect that hopefully turns out. Yeah, Tucker's a phenomenal player, but if you're not going to be able to give him what he wants, and clearly he wants way more than the Astros are willing to offer, then I think this is 100% the right move.
I wanted to make a point with you and see what you think as far as, a lot of people think, oh, the Astros are folding the tent. It's over with. They're not going to do anything this year. No Kyle Tucker. Bregman's probably going to walk. So where are they? Well, Alex Bregman gave you nothing for the first 2 months of the season. You got virtually nothing from first base the first 2 months of last season. You got no Kyle Tucker from June until August. You had no Chas McCormick, not the real Chas McCormick. Fake Chas McCormick showed up last year, and so he was terrible. And you still won the AL West by 3.5 games. It's a terrible division. Once you get in the playoffs, Jimmy, you and I know this, it's all about pitching.
Yep.
If you got pitching and you can get hot, and they got 4 pitchers at the top of this rotation that are pretty darn good, if they can come back, considering how many innings some of the young guys had last year. They've got Josh Hader and Brian Abreu in the bullpen. I mean, right there, you get some of those guys hot in the playoff, and boom, you can do something. It doesn't matter. You don't have to run out the 2019 Astro All-Star team that, they had, it's like everybody in the lineup can do, whatever, because even those guys turned out to be fallible in a Game 7 series. Why? Right. Because Washington had 2 red hot starting pitchers that just could shut you down in the series. Yeah. So what do you think? You feel like people are kind of overblowing a little bit of the Astros demise?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I said, I think Dana Brown has to, you're not trying to, people want to go all in. They want to put all their chips into a season, and that's not the best way to do it. Your best chance of winning a championship or a World Series is to make the playoffs as many times as possible. Because like you said, it's about having good pitching and getting hot. And we've seen teams get hot and move on. So I think this was a move where you got rid of a guy who's a phenomenal player that you had 1 year left, and you were able to get some more talent. Are they going to sign Bregman? The reports today said they're still in on him. So we'll see if they sign him. Paredes plays first, but offensively, Paredes has basically been the same player as Bregman the last 2 years. He's not as good defensively, but you're not losing much, I think, on the offensive side when you get a guy like him. And his numbers really took a hit in Wrigley Field, and everything you've seen when he comes to is it pronounced Dakin? I always screw it up. Dakin.
I still screw it up. I don't know.
when he goes to Old Minute Maid Park, you're going to see him have I think his offensive numbers are going to go up a little bit. But no, I think you're right. The team still has a ton of talent. I mean, you still got Altuve, you still got Yordan Alvarez, Peña's. I know he's not a stud, but he's a good player. You got Diaz, you got the pitching you mentioned. We'll see if there's other moves to be made. Complete punting on this season. That's clearly not what they're doing. I think they're trying to retool a little bit, trying to move some current assets to get some decent players and some future assets to try to keep that pipeline going, because we know how important it is. I mean, unless you're going to go spin like the Yankees or the Dodgers, like you got to have prospects that are willing to step in when these guys leave. And the Astros didn't have that for Tucker. And I think that's one of the reasons they were comfortable moving him to get some prospects back.
Until I figure out how to say the ballpark's name, I'm just calling it the Icebox.
Icebox, I like that. Yeah.
In just a few seconds, I want to ask you about the ripple effects of the Tucker departure. But first, if you're enjoying Houston Sports Talk, tell your friends about us. Share our links on your social media. Our live Texans postgame for the Chiefs game will be Sunday afternoon instead of after the Chiefs game. So keep an eye out in your notifications. And in case you missed it, yesterday, Texans analyst Garrett Williams, the man behind Houston Stressins, joined me. And Monday, Rockets analyst Mitty was a guest. Plenty of incredible content the last few days. And don't forget to give us a quick thumbs up. And of course, if you haven't done so, subscribe on YouTube and listen on the go with your favorite podcast app. All right, Jimmy, the Astros outfield right now is Chas McCormick, Jake Myers, and I guess Mauricio Dubon. Are you a Jacob Melton believer? And how do you feel about his potential?
Yeah, I am. He's shown you some of that potential, not to the level that maybe you would have wanted to see as your top prospect. But I think even last year, I think he had 15 homers, 30 stolen bases. So the power speed is there. I mean, he's got like phenomenal raw power. When you look at his exit velocities, I know that's not all. I know there's a lot more to hitting than just exit velocity, but I think he's there. Hopefully this will be a good offseason for him, and he can come into spring with the chances. You talk about moving guys fast. I think if this is our current outfield and we don't sign anybody going into the spring, I think Melton's going to have a legit opportunity to win a job out of spring training. I know he said the other day that the outfield is going to be McCormick and Myers, and I just don't know if I completely believe that. I mean, that would be great if McCormick is back to what he did a couple years ago, but I think they're going to need a little bit more offensively from the outfield, and I think that's maybe where we see someone like Jacob Melton or maybe even a Pedro Leon. I know he didn't do very well in his limited time, but maybe see if we get somebody else an opportunity.
Is Jacob Melton pretty close to what Jake Myers is? He actually probably better arm defensively, do you think? Or is that his potential, at least from the defensive side?
I don't think he's going to be as good as Myers. Myers is phenomenal defensively. We've seen that. I mean, the way he tracks balls and everything. I think Melton is really good. He's a bigger guy. I mean, he's a really good athlete. I don't think he's going to be like as good defensively as Myers is in center field, but that's not a knock on him. I mean, Myers is probably one of the better center fielders. You mentioned the arm thing. You take that out, the other aspects of what he does defensively is just phenomenal. So, you can live with a guy like Jake Myers in your lineup, but you would have to have other people to make up for it. We saw that with Jake Marisnik. He was never a good hitter in his time in Houston, but we had guys around him, so you could count on just his defense. I mean, we saw it with Maldonado for a few years, but right now we kind of need the offense. So I do think Melton is going to be a good defender. I just don't know if he's at Myers level. And like I said, it's not a knock on him. Myers is just really good defensively.
Who are your top 2 or 3 outfielders in the Astros system besides Jacob Melton? Or is there a couple of guys that you could see speeding through the system this year?
Luis Baez, I think, is a guy that moved really fast. Got a nice bonus a couple of years ago. The Astros moved him up to Double-A. Did okay this year. He was pretty good in High A. Got moved up to Double-A and actually acclimated pretty well. But 21 years old, big power. Your typical big right fielder, big guy, big power. That's one. There's a guy that I think that people need to kind of be on the lookout, Kenny Gomez, and he made it up to Asheville this year after having some pretty good numbers in Single A. He's only 19 though, so I don't think he's a guy that'll make an impact this year, but I think he's up there. But yeah, you're looking at Jacob Melton, Pedro Leon, and then probably after that, your next guys up are like Luis Baez, Kenny Gomez. There's other good players that they have, but not necessarily at that level of prospect.
Are there any free agent outfield options you would want Dana Brown to focus on?
I've really sat there and looked at it and tried to sort and see, who's available and what they could look at. I know some people have talked about Anthony Santander, and good hitter, strikes out a ton. We saw what he did with Baltimore last year. He's got the qualifying offer attached to him, so there's that draft compensation part of it. Outside of him, I just don't think there's a lot out there that will truly elevate your team. It's almost like, you're trying to win, but you almost would rather just give someone like Jacob Melton a shot or see if Chas McCormick gets back to what he was 2 years ago. Because what Chas McCormick was 2 years ago is pretty much better than every outfielder that's out there right now in the free agent market. So I don't know. I'll be interested to see which way they go. I think if Bregman walks and they can get that pick from losing him, letting him go somewhere else, I could see them not wanting to jeopardize getting that pick back, because they lost a pick last year, when they signed Hader. And those picks are important. I mean, that's, I did a piece on it a while back when we had James Click, and I was a James Click guy. And you looked at what Jeff Luhnow did, and it was phenomenal. But he had so many chips to play with. And I counted up how many first-round picks, how many second-round picks he traded, how many third-round picks. And the guy you go on, the list goes on and on, from the Greinke trade, J.B. Bukauskas, Seth Beer, both first-round picks, Corbin Martin was second-round pick. Josh Rojas was a nice found they threw in there. But there was just a lot of trades that he made where he had all these chips. And those picks are important to not only have that crop of players coming, but it gives you those prospects that you can trade for other guys. So, some people want to go all in, and when they want to sign all the free agents, and then you end up losing these picks, and then you can't recoup your farm system. And then at the deadline, you don't have guys to trade because maybe you only have 3 or 4 good prospects and you don't want to move them. I don't know. I could see them, like I said, just kind of sticking with McCormick and maybe giving somebody a shot versus going the route of signing somebody and losing that draft pick.
Yeah, I've got Dana on the clock. You've got about another year, and I've got to see either a Josh Field for Yordan Alvarez trade or a Miles Straw for Yonder Diaz trade. Come on, guy. You got to steal one like that.
Yeah.
The latest reports this afternoon have Nolan Arenado blocking a potential Astros trade. And if you ask me, Jimmy, I say thank goodness, because this felt like dodging a mini Jose Abreu situation to me.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan of trading for a guy who's aging. He's a good defender, don't get me wrong, but he had a 719 OPS. I mean, and the trend is downward, and it's not, could he come in and have a phenomenal season? Maybe so, but trading prospects for an aging player just doesn't seem like a good move, not just for now, but for the future as well. I feel like that's those moves that you see some of those bad teams make. And, it looks like they got the stacked all-star lineup, but he's 35 years old or 34, whatever he is, and on the downslope. So I'm with you. I'm glad. I mean, unless it was going to be, player to be named later in cash considerations and you were just going to take a flyer on him, but to give up prospects for a guy that's on the decline, I'd rather just roll with somebody else at third base than giving up prospects for an aging Nolan Arenado.
One thing nobody's talking about, and I was wondering, where does the acquisition of Cam Smith and Paredes leave Brice Matthews? Could the Astros use him as a trade chip, or does he have more potential than Jeremy Peña at shortstop, making Jeremy a trade chip in the next year or two?
Yeah, I think that's one of those cross that bridge when you get to it. I think Matthews is a really good athlete. Played quarterback in high school. So played shortstop, has played third base. I don't know if the Astros would want to use him in the outfield, but I think he's a good enough athlete to play in the outfield if they felt the need to do that. Move over to second base. I know we got Altuve, but I think they're going to give him every opportunity to get a chance. And then if he makes it up and say he plays third base, and then Cam Smith's coming along, and then maybe you make that decision then. But I mean, it does enhance your trade value when you have multiple good prospects. But I think they'll find a way to get these guys on the field. And Jeremy Peña, obviously, he's like league average offensively, but a good defender. I know he had some issues last year, but once again, you can live with those guys in your lineup if you have guys outside of that. So I think they can find a way to get all those guys, on the field at this point. But I think it'll be a matter of just finding out where you need help at and kind of going from there and, letting those guys get opportunities. So that it'll be a big year for Brice Matthews. He made it up to AAA, finished the season with Sugar Land. So we'll see kind of how he finishes off and where they decide to play him come spring. Is it going to be third more? He was playing a lot of third base last year. Do they let him play some shortstop, outfield? We'll find out.
Where do you see his potential compared to Jeremy Peña? I mean, if you think back to where you thought Jeremy Peña was going to be back when he was in AAA, where do they compare?
Yeah, I mean, I think like offensively, I think Matthews has probably has more potential offensively, just from the power, the speed combination. Peña was seen as the best defender in the draft when he got drafted. It's like defense has always been his calling card. And like I said, I think he made some throwing errors last year, but still he was still above average defensively. And we've seen what he's done defensively at shortstop. So I think a lot of that it's easier to see once they get up. I think Matthews is a good athlete, is going to be able to play wherever, but I think offensively he probably has a little bit more upside because he's a guy that I think can probably be a 20 homer, 30 stolen base kind of guy at the major league level, maybe even more stolen bases than that. So kind of different players. I think Peña was really, carried by his defense, especially early in his prospect stages. And then he came up and, the power started coming along, had some good seasons. But I think Matthews probably has more potential offensively.
Dana Brown has referred to Astros minor league pitching prospects Colton Gordon, Ryan Gusto, AJ Blueball, and Miguel Ulola, and hopefully I got those pronunciations all right. He's referred to them as starting pitching depth going into the year. Is there one or two guys from that group that excite you, Jimmy? Are any of them the next, say, Arrighetti or something?
Yeah, I think Ulola is the guy that's probably the most exciting. 22 last year, and struck out 171 batters in 130 innings, made it up to AAA. I believe it was the PCL championship game in Sugar Land, and he threw 4 scoreless innings, and I think he struck out 5. I'd have to look. That was either his first or his second outing in AAA, but it was an awesome response from a really young guy who strikes out a lot of batters, has some walk issues, but he doesn't give up hits and he strikes out a lot, and that's a recipe for success. So he's definitely one. I think Blueball, Gordon, even Gusto. I think those are guys that have an opportunity to come up, and it's just a matter of getting outs at the major league level. None of them have necessarily the put away pitch that maybe you see from the Ulola when it comes to the strikeouts. But all 3 had really good success last year, and it was in Sugar Land. And Sugar Land itself, Constellation Field, is pitcher friendly, but the rest of the PCL is not, and it's hitter friendly. And those guys had a lot of success. So, Blueball was our representative in the Futures game. Pitched well. I think he got 2 outs and with like 7 pitches or something like that. But I could see him getting an opportunity. But yeah, Ulola in that group, Ulola is the guy that definitely has the most potential to be an impact pitcher, just based on the strikeout stuff alone.
When you look at the Astros schedule, they have an open date every week until about halfway through May. Is there a 6-man rotation, do you think, Jimmy, before May? Because I'm wondering how careful they'll be considering Blanco and Arrighetti are coming off their first full season with the major league workload.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. You look at those two. You look at Hunter Brown pitching the most innings he's ever pitched. Hoping to get some of these guys back from injury. Who knows what we're going to have with McCullers or Garcia? But I could see them going that route. And I think it's just a matter of are the guys ready? If you bring up a Blueball and he's pitching well, then maybe you go to that 6-man. You don't force extra innings early in the season. But every win matters. So I think they're going to come out trying to win. But I'm excited for some of these young guys to get an opportunity because, like even last year, Augusto got an opportunity to get called up, and then the game got rained out, game 162, and he ended up not getting an opportunity. And it would have been nice to see what he could have done, going into spring. But yeah, I think we're going to see some of those guys in the rotation. We saw them this year. We saw how much you need that pitch and depth. Managing those innings early, I think, will be important because outside of Blanco's, he's older in age, but in terms of innings, he's young. And same with Arrighetti and Brown.
Earlier this morning, I saw a new study that Major League Baseball had done on pitching injuries. And this is what they said the injuries were being caused by, the increase that we've seen. Lack of spring training prep, guys chasing velocity. That's the biggest factor they cited. Sweepers. So many guys, using sweepers now. The lack of minor league baseball workload, which I thought was real interesting. Pitch clock was not a factor. In fact, they said that might be helping health, which I have argued to no avail with a lot of people on social media and elsewhere. I just thought that was a joke because I used to always point out that Steve Carlton would throw a pitch about every 8 or 10 seconds. And, all he had was about 3,000 or 4,000 strikeouts and 300 wins. So, and the last thing, the NCAA transfer portal. And I'm just wondering, Jimmy, this is something that's, available to every major league team now. And I'm kind of curious because the Astros are so into analytics. I wonder if they have been doing any of their own research on this, because I tend to believe that that's an advantage if you can figure out a way to keep these pitchers away from getting injured all the time.
Yeah, I think the velocity is like the one that sticks out, and we've seen that uptick in velocity. And there are some guys that succeed with the lower velocity, but it feels like everybody's calling up pitchers that are throwing in the high 90s. So it's kind of people get paid for strikeouts. If you're a starting pitcher and you have a season where you have a 3 ERA, but you strike out, 120 and 200 innings, like teams are going to be worried that eventually those balls in play are going to start falling and stuff. So people pay for strikeouts. So the pitchers chase that. They chase the velocity. They chase the strikeouts. I mean, in a situation like Lance McCullers, phenomenal arm, and he's been great when he's been healthy. And there was always the kind of the injury concern with him. Unfortunately, it's gotten to the point where it's been really bad over the last few years. But like, would Lance McCullers look back on his career and say, maybe I wish I didn't throw as hard to give some more innings? Maybe not. I mean, he got his money. He helped us when he needed to in 2017 and go some other in some of the other seasons as well. But yeah, I think the Astros are looking into everything, and I think that maybe the way they do things on the minors, the piggyback system that they do at the lower levels, does that have any increase in injury, or does it not? And I'm sure they have the answer on that. And if they don't, they're in it for themselves in this situation, so they're not going to share what they know. But no one's really starting. Bleav and Gusto and Gordon and all those guys, they started full on 7-8 inning games sometimes, but everywhere below that it was the piggyback. So even Ulola sometimes would only pitch 4 or 5 innings. So I don't know if that's one way they're trying to combat it, but obviously it hasn't completely worked because we still got Javier and Garcia and McCullers, and some other guys injured as well. So
yeah, and I sit on the hill that a lot of that was caused by short off seasons because you were going to the playoffs all the time. And then a lot of those guys played in that stupid, I hate it, World Baseball Classic following the Astros going into early November in the longest season in history because of the work stoppage pushed it back. So it goes into early November weekend. And then all of a sudden with no ramp up, that's one of the reasons they cited on the injuries, with pretty much no ramp up, they're going all out at the World Baseball Classic. And then immediately we see Jose Urquidy go down. Haven't seen him since then. Yeah. And, just several of those guys, including Luis Garcia, go down. And we hope we see him, but it's been, what has it been, 2 years now with Luis Garcia? These guys, they're also staying injured for a long time. And the other thing I'll throw out, Jimmy, and I've said this on my show before, but man, why not just let these guys try to pitch longer and say, look, you're going to have to figure it out not to get on velocity because we drafted you high. We think so much of you because you've got the arm. You don't have to overdo it. You don't have to throw it hard. It matters more in the major leagues where the ball is as opposed to how hard you're throwing the baseball. And if you guys figure that stuff out, you're going to help your salary, because all of a sudden, if we see we can pitch you 7 innings, which means we don't have to rely so much on the bullpen, and we're not having to deal guys that we like in our minor league system for middle relievers halfway through the year when we're in a playoff chase. It's all good for you as a ball club if these guys can go longer into games.
That would be ideal, these guys going deep in the games. But like I've talked to some of the prospects that have mentioned them being on velocity programs, where they get drafted and the Astros are trying to help get their velocity up. And some of it's not like they're not trying to take a guy that's throwing 89 and make him throw 99. But, the difference between maybe your fastball sitting 89 and 90 versus sitting 93, 94, I mean, that's a big difference. And like I think, Fernando Valdez is a good example. We've seen him ramp it up where he's throwing really hard, but it seems like he has a lot of success just in that 93, 94 range. Even Arrighetti, he may have hit 97, 98, but he worked a lot in that 94 range. And maybe some of it's just, kind of knowing when to, you're not giving 110% every single pitch. I don't know. The velocity is important. The strikeouts are important. I don't think that's going to go away, anytime soon, because you have a less likelihood of the ball being, falling in for a hit or going over the fence for a home run if you strike them out. So I think that's still kind of the name of the game for some of these pitchers. And I think some teams are just realized like that's part of it. And, it's going to be hard for these pitchers to get paid as these injuries continue to pop up. But you're right. You mentioned the analytics. I mean, the Astros, I'm sure they're doing some kind of digging, trying to figure out what they can do to prevent some of these guys from getting injured.
He's Astros Future on X, the website, astrosfuture.com. What have you got recently posted and what are you working on?
Yeah, so right now I've still been continuing the position review. So I just did the outfield one on Monday, which was a pretty fun one because there's a lot of talent in the outfield. But just looking at every position for the 2024 season, kind of reviewing them, and then shortly here in January timeframe, I'll be going to the top 3 prospects at each position. So starting out at catcher, first, second, all the way to the outfield, to the pitchers, relief pitchers, all that. So looking at the top prospects at each position. But over the last few months, there's also been a lot of reported signings, international guys. Some of them we may not see for a couple of years, but January 15th is that signing period. So I've reported quite a bit of those as well, and those are always fun to get excited about. You see like a guy like Luis Baez, Kenny Gomez that are having good seasons. They were in that crop a couple of years ago. So nice to see the Astros still staying active on that international market. Because we made a lot of progress on the team just that way, especially on the pitching. We talk about Javier and Garcia and Keating and some of these other guys, but yeah, so looking at all the positions, top 3 prospects, and that's pretty much it for now. And then we'll slowly work our way into February, March, get ready for spring training.
Sounds fantastic. And just a reminder to our viewers and listeners, again, the Texans post game, it's going to be on Sunday. The game's on Saturday, so enjoy the game, but come back to us on Sunday. We're going to be doing it live, so you can comment as well and get in on the comments and kind of be interactive with us. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on with us, Jimmy, to talk about this stuff during the holidays. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, appreciate it. It's always fun, and I'll be glad to do it again. Maybe come spring training, we can talk about some of the prospects that are making their way onto the team.
Sure thing.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.